one of the things we can support each other to do is to flex our loving muscles, to become confident and able to tell each other that we love each other.
Hello, I'm Karen Mellors.
Hello there, I'm Dr. Rosie Daniel.
You've just tuned in to Alive and Loving It, and we're here to help you bring joy and energy back to your life. Hello, and thanks for joining us again. This week is a very, very favourite topic of mine, emotions. And as an emotional resilience coach, I'm fascinated by them. Why do we have them? How do they impact our health? How do we live with them and feel safe enough to express them freely? And why do we try so hard to live without them? Why do we make them wrong? Hello, Rosie. This is a juicy topic, isn't it?
It sure is, Karen, and it's actually really, really important to me. I think if I was to describe myself as any kind of holistic doctor, it would be as a mind-body doctor, because for me, the question of what we do with our feelings and our emotional health is absolutely basic to how well people recover and live and flourish.
Well, thank goodness for you. Thank goodness for you in my life on this subject. So tell us, why are our emotions so important in our health?
Well, first and foremost, they tell us what's going on. So when we have feelings, it's because something's happening around us. And it's very, very important that we listen to our feelings. So a lot of us, I don't know about you, but have grown up around people saying things like children should be seen and not heard. And without that kind of emotional currency or fluency or growing up with emotional intelligence. And a lot of us have had to learn this retrospectively, what are our feelings telling us and how important is that? So I think it's really at the heart of how we live and how we be, Karen.
Yeah, I mean, we're living such a fast-paced life now that sometimes we're going that quickly, we don't even recognize when we're having emotions. But why is it so important that we need to express our emotions, Rosie?
Well, there is an adage in the holistic health movement that what we repress, what the mind represses, the body expresses. So when we stuff down our emotions and, pretend we are fine, that dreadful word.
Yeah, a lot.
The emotional energy can be playing havoc in our bodies. So I'm sure many people listening will be thinking, do I do that? Do I sit on anger? Do I try and please people and be nice all the time and not let people know if I'm hurting or if I'm furious or, and a lot of illnesses like, for example, heartburn or ulcers in the stomach start with people sitting on their anger. And I think that, if you take authors like Louise Hay, she's gone to the further extremes of this. She will ascribe an emotion for almost every part of the body. And certainly in Chinese medicine, they do talk about the fact, for example, that our lungs suffer when we are holding on to grief. I've said the anger can affect our liver and our belly. Our kidneys often play up when we're holding on to fear and betrayal. So, you can take it perhaps a bit too far, this kind of thing, but there's a lot in it. I can often see when a person comes to me with a very difficult chest that's all the time getting infections, that there's grief that they are holding on to. And I think that was even something you told me about in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. You were the first person that said to me, if your lungs were weeping, what would they be crying for? And I think that was the first time I had that mind-body connection of, there's something deeper going on. I mean, I have a physical restriction. I've got scoliosis in the spine and my right lung is restricted. So physically, I am prone to getting chest infections. And in my 20s and 30s, I was getting them regularly. But it was only when I started addressing my grief of even having the scoliosis and having a back operation and other losses that I'd had in my life. It was only when I started addressing that the chest infections got less and less and less. And I was working with a homeopath at the time. So I was having a homeopathic remedy, and my beautiful homeopath, Lorraine, was helping me talk about my grief. And I can't remember the last time I had one, and I'm 54 now. So, contrary to other belief, these problems that we have, these illnesses, do not need to get more as you get older. They can actually get less. So
you just put your finger on such an important thing, the expressing of our emotions. So if you've always been a person that's shoved your emotions down, it may take a little bit of encouragement and support. And I know you do work with circles, Karen, to allow particularly women to find their voice and to name their feelings.
Yeah.
That's important, isn't it, in your world?
It is, yeah. I mean, the women's circles, the wellness retreats, they are to create a container, a loving container. Because the trick is to start expressing emotions when you haven't been able to do it before, is you need to feel safe enough. And yeah, the circles can, it's magic, isn't it? The love that's created in the circles and on retreats, we feel it, and our nervous systems start to relax. We start to slow down, and we start to feel safe enough within ourselves to express these emotions.
And the power of the circle is just awesome. When I was working at the Bristol Cancer Help Centre, every week we'd have a new group of maybe 12 people coming in, total strangers, all very in deep states of shock and fear and grief and anger and upset. But somehow that circle created a container, and everybody's compassion, the combined compassion and love and concern of those people, seemed to create a container that was big enough to hold those emotions and to allow them to flow. And people felt so much lighter after they had expressed those feelings. But really, this is sort of half of the story, because yes, there are our feelings and our emotions, but also there are our emotional needs.
Exactly. Yeah. What are those, Rosie? Talk more about.
Yeah, there's a group in Bristol called the Human Givens that I just want to honour, who do fantastic work in this domain, because they've mapped out really what our human needs are. And really, of course, everybody knows the need for love, affection, intimacy, and recognition, being noticed, being honoured, being treated like you matter. And often in the workplace, for example, people can go on and on and on and on and on giving, and nobody stops and says, wow, you have just done such a fantastic job. We need that. And so this is important. And there are many more. They name having space and privacy so that we can actually reflect and process and notice what we're feeling.
So just tell me who they are again, Rosie.
They're called the Human Givens.
The Human Givens, yeah.
Yeah, Human Givens in Bristol. And they have a list of the kinds of emotional needs. But the thing that I like to say is that these needs, to me, are as important as our needs for food, oxygen, light. To me, they are primary. Because if we don't get these needs met, we are starving emotionally. I know that's a bit dramatic, but
no, I get it. Yeah,
I think that is the way. And very often women can be meeting the emotional needs of people around them, but not necessarily getting their own needs met. And I'm sensing a lot of nodding going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking about, that's what we're brought up to be as women. Care for others, think about others, put others before ourselves. I mean, we are the nurturers, we are the caregivers, we are, we can love. Our capacity to love is huge. But when did it become that we do that and not receive? That overcare where we're giving out all the time. How did we learn that it was wrong to receive as well? I mean, it's fundamental for
It
our well-being.
is. I mean, I think the church and the place of women in society to serve and be the gentlewoman and be ever present in that archetype of mother, nurse, nanny as the caregiver, and these are beautiful aspects of our nature. But it's not the whole story by any manner of means. But the giving and receiving of love is it is our primary soul food. And I think that one of the things we can support each other to do is to flex our loving muscles, to become confident and able to tell each other that we love each other.
Yeah.
And there's a great book by a lady called Barbara Fredrickson called Love 2.0. So she does a lot of research about love, as if we actually need research.
We do, though, don't we?
But she's done a lot of research, and she came to the conclusion that love is not a given and it's not necessarily unconditional. That actually, she says, her punchline is, we need to remake love with the people that we care about. So, if we have an auntie or a granny or a friend that we take for granted, they're just there, and granny sends me 20 quid at Christmas kind of thing.
Absolutely.
That person is living and needs that loving connection, because every single one of us flourishes when we have attention and when we're nurtured emotionally. And in my work with people with cancer, it's almost always either that kind of emotional deprivation or being in an emotional desert, which is a major thing to address, or it's trauma or wounds that have happened that are sitting in the psyche, which haven't been healed, haven't been processed, haven't been accessed. So I know, Karen, that you work as an emotional resilience coach. So tell us more about that.
Well, before I started the work, and when I started the work was on myself, that's why I became involved with with a beautiful friend of mine called Joey Walters, and her business. Her work is called Rising Connected. And I went for myself because what I was noticing is that I was feeling nothing, Rosie. I was numb. And that is a feeling in itself. My whole system was shutting down. And the majority of the time, I was nervous and I was anxious. So that's why I discovered this. And the reason why I got into that state is because I'd really been taught that resilience was coping. Just get on with it, stiff upper lip. And actually what I heard, Rosie, as well, was be professional. So in the workplace, you're not allowed to be a human. You've just got to be professional. So I kept coping and thinking that that's what resilience was. And, really, if I'm honest, I thought crying and releasing emotions and being were needy and weak. So that's in our society, isn't it? I was living in that sphere. And then I started, doing the work on myself and realizing that the triggers I was getting every single day, which were just situations that were happening, were touching a deeper wound. and I was overreacting to situations. It felt overwhelming, but those emotions were real for me. What my experience, was really happening. So through one-to-one work with Joey, I discovered, where this deeper wounding was coming from, and in a safe environment was able to express my emotions, not just grief and sadness, but anger. I mean, that's a really difficult one for me to express, particularly releasing it where I'm not frightened of hurting somebody, but that needs to come out and it needs to move. And you can feel it physically in your body. I get tingles sometimes when emotions are moving, particularly in my arms or up the sides of my face. And this, if an emotion is a chemical reaction, it's alchemy that these emotions are coming out, and they have to, like you say, we're going to have health problems if they don't. So understanding the original trauma and being held in a safe space to express what we couldn't express when that trauma happened, which is probably at a much younger age, and our nervous system was not mature enough to deal with it. So now I know that resilience is accepting we have emotions, meeting them, releasing them in a safe space, and moving on. Not coping, not just blocking them down. That is not resilience, and it's not helping us. I mean, how does that land with you from a sort of a physical point of view? What's going on if we just keep repressing these emotions?
Well, the most fascinating evolution happened during my lifetime, which is the advent of this whole science of psychoneuroimmunology. A jolly long word, and it's not long enough because it's talking about, the mind and the endocrine system and the immune system being joined up. It turns out it's all joined up. So what happened was that the scientists, first of all, discovered that we have these receptors. The first ones that were discovered by Dr. Candace Pert and her team were the receptors for the opiate type molecules. So these are called enkephalin or endorphin. And people will have heard that you get a burst of endorphin when you run or exercise. Well, that was back in the late 90s. Since that time, they have discovered some 400 what she calls molecules of emotion.
Wow.
So when I was at medical school, we were taught that nervous impulses went down a nerve, across a synapse, and down another nerve, and that was how it all connected up. But it turns out that these molecules of emotion are secreted by every cell in the body. And so you get this incredible sense of the rapidity with which an emotion can change the chemistry of the body. So, when you see those wildlife programs and there's a fish on the sand that's looking white, and a predator comes over, and in an instant it's gone brown, and you can't see it. It's the same color as the sun.
Yeah.
Well, if I suddenly saw somebody standing outside with a gun, every cell in my body would be changed. The functioning of every cell in my body would be changed by the wave of intense emotion and fear that would go through my body. And so, as you can sense, if I'm trying to heal from an illness or not have cancer or not have repeated infections, what's going on in my emotional world is so important. This is absolutely incredible. So when people come to me, whether it's with cancer or heart disease or diabetes, we're starting to look at what's the kind of emotional sea in which you are swimming. What is the sort of state, your background state? Because a lot of people are living in a kind of sea of dread or a sea of anxiety or a sea of grief, actually. Yeah. And that's the marinade of ourselves that's going on. I mean, I know at the level behind that, we have our nervous system, our autonomic And the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, we'll talk more about that when we talk about stress. But, it is that crucial that we come to know what's going on for us, and we can detox emotionally, and get ourselves into a lovely fresh state emotionally where we are able to feel anew. If we are full up, like with overeating, or toxicity from food, if we're full up with toxic emotion, how are we going to feel pleasure or joy or love?
I mean, when I was in this state of not feeling anything, a few months in, I realized you can't choose what you feel. You can't choose to just feel joy. You feel everything or you feel nothing. And I think a lot of the time we're avoiding feeling the painful feelings. But the amount of grief you feel is so directly attributed to the amount of love that you've had. I mean, you can't have one without the other, can you? So, just accepting that to be whole, we feel the whole spectrum of emotions. But how are your patients when you ask them, how are your emotions? What sort of responses do you get? Do people know? Is this information inside us? How easy does it come out?
Well, that's such a great question. And but first, just before that, you talked about being numb emotionally, and so when things have been too difficult for us to feel or process, we can freeze, which is the other side of what can happen with our sympathetic nervous system. We can just freeze and not feel things. And I think, we talked about what happens to women. What about for guys? Little boys don't cry, and the British stiff upper lip. This is all still very, very much in our society. But when I broach this with my clients, I probably will just start very gently with saying, in the past few years, how have things been in terms of distress for you or stress? Would you say there have been any chinks in your armor? Has there been anything that's gone on that might be weighing you down or troubling you? And usually, because by that point I've established rapport and trust with people, out it all pops. And, there are very, very few people who can say, no, there's been nothing, because life is like that. We get things coming at us all the time. The number of people for whom, either the long-term illness of a relative or the death of a relative or a broken relationship, these kinds of things that are still sitting there, taking a lot of energy, actually, because we all need our full vital energy for life, to be well, to be happy, and to be living at potential. But if there is a wound there, an emotional wound, that can be drawing a lot of energy.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's coming up to be expressed, and I describe people as being ripe, they're really ripe to let this emotion out. And I've such trust in the body as well, that that's the right time for a person to release this emotion that they've suppressed.
Something you said earlier was absolutely key, which is that we can only do this when we feel safe enough and when we feel held and loved and supported, because it's like a defrosting process. We've talked about the emotions freezing, and they're frozen for good reason. We haven't had the warmth, we haven't had the holding for that defrosting process to start. And just like, when you sit on your leg and you get pins and needles, often exactly as you say, when that starts to melt, you can feel, emotional pins and needles. It can feel uncomfortable and embarrassing, and but make sure always that you have the support, the love, the holding. And you talked about the circles that you run, as providing that container and the love of many women together supporting each other. There are men's groups too, like the Band of Brothers, where men are doing this kind of work too, because boy, have guys got that whole legacy of shoving it down.
Absolutely. And I was really touching into when you were saying the amount of energy to squash this emotion. And the more it builds, the more you're ripe and you're ready to start expressing it, it takes more energy to squash it down. And in this coping way, this like, don't show my emotion, feeling shameful about it, because a whole load of shame on top can also take a lot of energy from us. And we might find ourselves that we're feeling tired all the time. Or we don't want to socialize, or we don't want to go into certain environments. We don't want to be in a loving environment, because actually that might just be it that brings it all out. And we have this, we just can't help it. I've had people come into retreats, and I've had people come into circle where nothing has been said and the tears just start to flow. And I'm finding that people are avoiding that warmth more and more and hiding themselves away because they're really worried about this emotion coming out. And if I had one wish, it would be, don't separate yourself. It would be, find a space where you feel safe enough to let it go, because there's light and love on the other side. There really is. I'm speaking from lots of experience.
And I think we just need to address the things that people do to keep the emotions down. The big one is, of course, overeating. But it can be gambling, it can be drinking, it can be drugs, it can be compulsive sex, and gaming on the consoles and so forth. So this unmet need, the unmet emotional need for love and attention, has many faces. But in this community, our hope is that people will find loving connections and through other things, through yoga classes and meditation groups and walking groups and, all sorts of places where fellowship can be found. Do you know, for example, at the moment, something crazy like 35% of adults are living alone? I mean, how did that happen? It's just crazy. And so, of course, they're prone to isolation and loneliness, especially as they're getting older and sort of disconnected from work and so forth. But our local GP surgery in Frome did an experiment where they identified all the people over 50 living alone. They allocated them a volunteer for 3 hours a week to pop in, to go shopping, to go for a walk, to sing a song, to do a bit of yoga. And they reduced hospital admissions in that group by 32%.
Wow.
Yeah, just by addressing loneliness and isolation. So, this is not small stuff. This is not nice to have. This is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And in our next episode, we're going to be, we'll be sharing all the way through our series the different therapies and treatments that you can look into and explore. But in our next episode, we're looking at emotional freedom technique. And this is one, Rosie, that I know that you absolutely recommend to so many people. So just share a little bit about that with us, and don't give too much away, because we'll be talking about that in the next episode with an amazing expert that we have.
Okay. Well, in my earlier career, I used to work with transpersonal counselors and psychosynthesis counselors, and that's a whole episode in itself. But more recently, I've started working with an amazing lady called Rowena Beaumont, who practices emotional freedom technique, which is a deceptively simple technique to help release emotional energy. And the difference, the way people feel lighter and more whole again is incredible. So more of that very, very soon.
Yes. So I knew this would be a juicy topic, and honestly, we could speak for another hour about emotions. I think we'll be, through the years that we're doing this podcast, we'll be circling back many, many times, because I think the first thing we're going to do is just say it out loud that emotions are natural, we need them, and we should not suppress them. Can we start changing society in our community, please? Right here, today, right now. It's been wonderful speaking to you again, Rosie. I am so enjoying sharing this information with everybody and unlocking your wisdom from those 40 years. Many, many people need to know this, and the time is now. So we will see you again next week. And thank you from me.
Yeah, thank you from me. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Alive and Loving It. We really hope that today's conversation has sparked your passion and shown you ways to open up into the vibrant life that's possible for you.
Absolutely, Rosie. I mean, we have to remember transformation begins with love, and that's self-love, love for others, and love for our beautiful planet. When you embrace love and you just allow yourself to receive as much as you give, you unlock the fullest potential of your life.
That is the truth, and we're here to support you every step of the way on your journey. So if you enjoyed what you heard today, please join our community, check out our trainings and our services and the events where we can all go deeper together. And do please send us your feedback. We want to hear your ideas for the podcast, who you'd like to see us interview, the questions you want to ask, and get answered through the contact page on our website, aliveandlovingit.org.
I can't wait to read them. And when you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter and updates. And what about following us on Instagram as well? We are at Alive and Loving It Community. Once you've signed up to the newsletter, you'll receive extra notes from today's show and more inspiration to help you live your most vibrant life.
Thank you for being with us. Keep shining, stay true to yourself, and remember, this is your time to live your fullest, healthiest life.
So until next time, keep doing what you love most in life. I know Rosie and I will be, always. We're so excited to connect with you on the next episode of Alive and Loving It. And we welcome you with open hearts to our Alive and Loving It community.